Hi guys, David here with Scientific Reactions. So today I want to talk about a really interesting startup company that I ran across called CROPS. And I guess this stands for Carbon Removal and Sequestration, where the C is obviously carbon, and then I think you take the R and the O. Acronyms can be a stretch sometimes. But anyway, that's the startup company. And where this came about was actually something you may not have heard of. It's very interesting, is the X Prize Carbon Removal Prize being funded by Elon Musk. And this is supposedly maybe the largest prize for technology development that's ever been announced. And it's a $100 million prize for carbon removal. So Elon Musk put this together. It's basically aimed at tackling the biggest threat facing humanity, fighting climate change, and rebalancing Earth's carbon cycle. Funded by Elon Musk and the Musk Foundation, this $100 million competition is the largest incentive prize in history. And basically it says this 4-year global competition invites innovators and teams from anywhere on the planet to create and demonstrate solutions that can pull carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere or oceans and sequester it durably and sustainably. To win the grand prize, teams must demonstrate a working solution at a scale of at least 1,000 tons removed per year, model their costs at a scale of 1 million tons per year, and show a pathway to achieving a scale of gigatons per year in future. In other words, they don't want some sort of carbon technology or carbon removal technology that's going to be just sort of like a fancy but small scale thing, but they want something that has been demonstrated at a certain scale, could be easily modeled at a larger scale, and it is at least hypothetically possible to do at a huge scale, billions of tons per year. I found this article here from World Resources Institute, and I can't tell how credible it is, but in any case, I'll include the link below. But according to this article, at least, it says that globally scientists predict that up to 10 gigatons of CO2 will need to be removed annually from the atmosphere by 2050, with increased removal capacity up to 20 gigatons of CO2 per year by 2100. And I guess this would be to prevent or to stop climate change. So that gives you a sense of the scale. So if one of these X Prize initiative startup companies or teams manage to make a path forward that could eventually get to gigaton scale, they're actually presumably going to make a meaningful impact on the overall climate balance in our ecology. And the competition is supposed to last for another 3 years, and it says it will last for 4 years through Earth Day 2025. So let's get into the actual tactic or the approach that CROPS is going to take. So they say, what if there was a way to capture carbon from the air and safely store it for 1,000 years or more? And what if the cost of capturing that carbon is near zero with no new technology needed? And that's a really interesting idea because a lot of the carbon capture technology that I've seen before requires very high-tech facilities. So overall, their approach is very simple. They say, a field of corn catches carbon from our air quite efficiently. That field captures about 400 times as much carbon as humanity annually puts into the entire column of air above the field from ground to space. I think their point is that corn can capture a lot of carbon. So they say where to put such gathered bales of corn residue. The deep ocean, which naturally receives huge quantities of biomass from the land carried by rivers. So basically what they're saying is if they take corn and then they grow corn, they keep the corn, and then they take everything else and they bale it up into big bales, what they're saying is if we go and drop that into the ocean, existing analysis shows that such carbon will not return to the atmosphere for many centuries, perhaps 1,000 years. They say this idea is 20 years old, first proposed by Benford and Metzger. Since then, lab experiments and direct placement and observation of a test corn residue bale in the deep Pacific have already been done and are continuing. So typically, they say that we're going to use biomass that is now mostly left to rot in the fields. This demands no new land, leaving natural ecosystems intact. It uses residues that can be gathered and shipped with the same equipment used to bring in the crop, made easier as they need not be cleanly handled. It requires no new technologies. And they say farming is the largest scale human activity, covering about 10% of the globe's land area. We estimate that the US alone can sequester 1.2 billion tons, or over 1 gigaton, which was one of the requirements of the X Prize, right? To get to that gigaton scale. including the major farmed crops. Moreover, they say America has the largest agricultural volumes and waterwork networks in the world, so partially like our system, the U.S. system of rivers and estuaries and whatnot, means that if they were to harvest this corn residue, they could easily get it to barges on these different rivers and then take it to the sea from there. And what they have down here is some pictures of the corn residue bales deep in the ocean, and according to their measurements, that they're quite stable. So I was also able to find an article about the founders of the company that includes some points from an interview. And they say that carbon dioxide is currently being removed from the air by an industrial plant in Iceland that took 5 years and $500 million to build at a cost of $1,000 per ton of CO2. The founders say that to seriously address the rise of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, we need to take about 5 billion tons annually. So by that measure, 5 billion times $1,000 is 5 trillion per year. It's not going to happen industrially. Compare that with our technology for pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. Plants, which do the job for free. In carbon sequestration, most people want to build plants, but we want to sequester plants. So they're saying plants as in factories versus plants as in just actual plants. So apparently these guys have been working on this for quite some time, and I think that the X Prize has kind of re-galvanized things for them. So it says that 12 years ago they sank a 1-ton bale of corn stover, plant detritus left in the field after harvest, in the deep ocean off the coast of California. Researchers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute have made trips to the site every 3 years or so to collect samples. So far, according to Benford, the block of material has remained intact and inert. So basically they say, our method is to place this stuff on the seafloor below the thermocline, where the water temperature is just above freezing. There's almost nothing alive beyond microbes at the bottom of the ocean because there's no oxygen, no light, and no nutrients, so the crop's approach will have zero to minimal impact on the marine habitat. Now that's interesting. You know, I get that there's very little life down there, but what would be interesting to me is if we ended up dropping all of these bales of corn, especially, you know, if we did this at global scale, and so there's like thousands and, you know, maybe even billions of corn stover bales being dropped below the thermocline, if we wouldn't maybe kick off like an entirely new type of ecosystem in the deep ocean. That would be pretty interesting. Now, I don't know if that is the case or not, but it is interesting to note that, as I said before, there's been 15 teams of the 1,132 teams for the X Prize that have so far received a $1 million milestone award. And you can see here, these are the teams all over the world. And then there are a further 60 that have received, or a top 60 award. So maybe it's an additional 45. And looking through it, it doesn't look like crops is actually part of this list, which is a surprise to me because I think the concept for crops for this particular carbon sequestration plan is really solid. And it makes me wonder if it's because, you know, did they not make the top 60 from some technicality, or are these 60 ideas just actually better than the crops concept? Because in my opinion, the crops concept is one of the coolest carbon sequestration plans I've seen yet. And a big part of why it's so cool is because it doesn't take anything high tech. I think there's a lot to be said for simplicity, you know, keep it simple, right? As a mantra. And if your technology relies on something that is just, you know, crazy difficult or complicated, but it's very fancy, and you think like, wow, this is high tech, that's probably a sign that it's not going in a good direction, because complexity, as one of my friends says, complexity breeds cost. It's hard to imagine anything more simple than just growing plants, taking what you need from the plant, baling the rest up, putting it on a barge, and then just dropping it in the ocean. But in any case, it does also make me curious about these other 60 ideas. Let me know in the comments if you think I should, but I think I might do some videos on some of these other ones, like Plant Village, Takachar, Bioeconomy Institute Carbon Removal Team. So, calcite from 8 Rivers Capital. That sounds pretty interesting. Well, anyway, if you'd like to learn more about this startup company, just check out the links below. And I want to thank you for joining me for this science update, and I hope you'll join me again in the future soon. Bye.